welcome to the first episode of Entering the Creative Unknown. And I hope this is going to be the first of many sessions where I speak with artists on their creative process. And today I am so happy to have iconographer Catherine Kober in our conversation with me today. And I'm just going to read her artist statement so we know a little bit about how she works and what she does. So, Catherine is an iconographer living in greater Minnesota. She paints icons to connect her with her childhood memories in her grandmother's home and the icons on her grandmother's fireplace mantle. She paints to tell the multifaceted story of the incarnation through the ancient and new language of iconography. She's inspired by folk art and Russian iconography. She paints with egg tempera, acrylic, and gold leaf. She writes, Saint Maximus the Confessor wrote about the incarnation of Christ having the unique power to unite paradoxes while also honoring their distinction. This idea of uniting what Jung called the tension of the opposites and preserving the unique distinction informs my work as an iconographer. So I was really excited to have you be the first person in conversation because, first of all, I have your artwork hanging in my home. And also, I am very personally drawn to iconography, even though I don't know a lot about it. So, can you first tell me what iconography is and what it means to you?
Okay, there is no what I found as I grow as an iconographer is that there is no great definition for iconography. I mean, we can sort of circumnavigate or dance around a definition. It is a language, and it is a way of writing theology, but it's very symbolic. It's also though a relationship. So the icon puts you in relationship with the person. I mean, it's usually almost always a person in the icon, and it's interesting. As I come to know people who are Orthodox, because iconography traditionally comes from like an Orthodox Christian world, or like it kind of grew organically in that world, although Roman Catholics have had it too. But as I get to know more Orthodox who really use icons, I mean, they really do speak to them as if they're speaking to people. I just started taking a class on drawing in the very like traditional Byzantine style of iconography, and I was so fascinated to learn that what separates like this very old Greek way of drawing from what would later develop in the West is that in the West, it developed to be like a perspective as though you were sitting in an audience looking at a stage. So Western art would go on to develop like a perspective that puts like what's happening almost like on a stage and you are back watching it. But the Byzantine Greek style emerged from Greek theater, and it wanted you to feel like you were on stage, not in the audience. So that's why typically in iconography, there isn't like perspective. It's like you are confronting who is in the image as if they were in front of you, as if you were with them directly without like this sort of like audience perspective, if that makes sense. But it's really amazing though, like the more I just look at icons, how different they can be. I mean, each culture, each like region within a broader culture can have its own style. And there's no, I feel like there are rules, but it's so hard to pinpoint what those rules are because there are just so many different varieties of icons. Um, I hope that answers somewhat of or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it does. And while you were speaking, I was thinking when you were saying that they present so differently in different cultures, but also I'm imagining as you develop as an artist, you're also developing a relationship to the icons themselves.
Yeah.
So just like when we are in relationship with somebody, the relationship it evolves and it alchemizes, and we're in relationship with it. So tell me a little bit about when you're working on, right now I'm going to say a single portrait of a saint, or I'm just going to say saint because I don't know what other
Yeah.
icons there are.
Right.
I'll say saint. I'm sure there's a lot of
Yeah.
different things. Tell me how your relationship develops as you go through your artistic process, or does it begin before you even place paint on
I mean, it
paper?
depends. So in the slideshow that I shared with you, one of the slides is of two icons of Saint Kateri Tekakwitha that I painted, and I chose her because she's always been a saint of mine since childhood that I've been so captivated by. She was a Mohawk Indian who converted, or Native American who converted to Catholicism, and she lived in the late 1600s. So I was like, I know I want to paint her icon. And that first icon of her I painted in 2023 was one of my first icons I painted ever. I think it was my first saint. Like, I learned just painting Jesus Christ icon over and over and over again just to try to get some of those skills down. But I really wanted to get to know her in her cultural context. Like, I wanted to look at examples of Mohawk art from around that time period. And so I decided to incorporate some of that in her garments. And then but there's also this like connection to my relationship with the saint. So she's holding a tiger lily. I've always been very captivated by tiger lilies, and just they're bright, they're orange, they're speckled, they're not this like pure white lily. And so it is like, in this example, I was trying to get to know her in her context and like what art surrounded her as a person potentially. And so that's important to me too, to just sort of like bring out the earthiness of the saint and put them down to earth, I guess you could say. But also, I think there is like archetypal elements to saints. And for me, it is important to bring that out in the icon as well. And oh, it's just kind of hard. It's kind of hard to describe that, I guess. Or I'll probably have to like think more about how I want to phrase that. But I also, and maybe this gets to one of your questions too, that we're considering is, how do I know when an icon is finished? And I think for me, it is when something in the icon surprises me, or it's like, okay, this isn't exactly how I pictured it, but it's like, but nevertheless, there they are, because I think I don't want to feel like I'm owning these saints and the sort of like archetypal elements of their stories that affect me, that there is something that I am engaging with that is different from myself.
Well, how do you know when an archetype has started to walk into the room of your work?
Hmm. I think sometimes it's there from the beginning, like with Saint Dymphna. I've painted her icon quite a few times, and she is a saint, I feel like, whose story closely resembles, I think it's the fairy tale Many Furs, yes, where, her father wanted to marry her, and she ended up fleeing him with her spiritual father, who was a priest, and started a home for the poor, I think, in Brussels. I think her story goes something like that. And her father ends up finding them both and killing them both. But and she's the patron saint of those who struggle with mental illness. And I think like she as a saint just already holds for me a lot of archetypal energy, because her story is so, you find it a lot in fairy tales and stuff like that. And so sometimes it's just already there. And I am at that point playing with that a lot, and sort of like, but in how her story has, how I have been in relationship with her story, just with my own journey with mental health, seeing a therapist. and that sort of thing. But I think like, if it's not already there, I just try to find like images, maybe from a dream I had, or something just sort of pops up in the unconscious and connects with that saint. Like I painted an icon called Christ in the Unconscious with he's holding a rabbit, and that was based on a very vivid dream I had um, that I just really wanted to work with. And I think you and I both like Jung, and so that phrase, creative or active imagination, that comes across in my iconography, or I sometimes bring that about too. Mhm.
I think it's really interesting because when I work artistically with dreams, I think a lot about like how do I hold reverence for how the dream actually was given to me,
Mhm.
and also bring in, my own essence into the piece, because sometimes, you get an image in a dream, but it doesn't necessarily resonate with you completely artistically, even though you want to present it in artistic form. And I think when we're talking about, I think that like this is just my own projection, my association, that if I were working with something like saints, there would even be more reverence there, that I have to hold this image or this presentation of the image in its purest form. So, how do you, that's when you're talking about the tension between the opposites, that's a really big thing, I would think, in your work. Like, how do you hold that space between being true to what you're representing and also representing yourself without consuming the icon itself?
Yeah, I really love that actually. It is an interesting tension. I think I rely on the boundaries of iconography itself a lot. So I do try to keep it, a little bit Greek, a little bit Athens, or a little bit Russian, I guess. Um, but I do really love your reflection. I do think that as I learn more about the Eastern side of Christianity, it does seem a little bit messier. It does seem to de-emphasize purity. Um, I guess it depends on what we're talking about here. I mean, they've preserved a lot of their liturgy, like a lot of their rituals, I would say, are very preserved. They're very lengthy. But in terms of, I think, how people live out Christianity, it seems there's more room for like the person, maybe in relationship with the saint or Christ, if that makes sense. And so I think even just like the diversity of icons that are out there, I see a lot of organic meshing together. But you're right, because in my artist statement, I talk about how we can have meshing together, but we also need to preserve some unique identity there. Yeah. And that maybe that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah, so just thinking about like looking at this image, and we're going to move through different images in a moment, but can you break down like the basics of iconography? Like when I always think about, the halo of gold, and that's the thing that I'm most drawn to because that's how I see myself.
Yeah, I love
Just,
that. Yay.
but I just love that idea of just like being in this, having this golden circle, whether it is being connected to source or just emitting my own light. So can you sort of break down the structure of doing an icon like this? And I know that we're going to move through and there's going to be bigger images of scenes, but can we talk about this structure right now?
Yeah, I think this definitely reflects how I first learned iconography, which was from like an Athens school. So the nose is very long. And if you're reading icons, that's a symbol of long suffering. And then everything starts with like the shape of the head being sort of like an egg shape. Now she's kind of looking at different directions, so maybe that's not so obvious. But then, a lot of measure is measured by the eye too. So one of the first things you draw is the eye, and that gives you the length of the nose. There should be, I can't remember now if it's about 5 eyes across the forehead. Maybe that's more apparent in the first one. But a lot of the structure of the face is measured by the eye. And then you're trying to make it so that there is sort of like a mysterious light working with her. And because she is Native American, I didn't want to make that so bright. Like it's an interesting dance in iconography. It's like, yes, there's features that are very symbolic and not lifelike, but you also want to be able to recognize that they're people, and so yeah, I'd say like that is at work in this icon. Like the face is very measured out by the eye, and she has like Greek eyes. I mean, they have the little tails. Um, and then it's simple too. Like I recently learned that you don't like paint their shadow. Because again, like you're not there, there's a de-emphasis on perspective. Like you're looking at them in a
And
very.
is there always a container around a piece?
Yeah, I learned that usually, yep. So the lines, yep. Because I think I've also heard that icons are windows into heaven. So that line sort of like frames that and contains that in a way. Now I don't always put lines around my icons, and I've seen icons that don't have it, so it just kind of depends, I guess. But definitely that's present in these pieces as well. And yeah, the halo, I've never really learned the history behind the halo. And I like what you said though about is it coming from me, or is it signifying from somewhere else something about me? And I think it's probably a little bit of both, and you know, it just kind of depends on the culture that you're coming from with iconography. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Let's see. I don't even know what it is. So,
Yeah, I forgot. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this,
okay, so
yeah,
let me just say one thing really
yeah.
quickly, just
Go
because
ahead.
I'm just so struck by it. But when you were this reminds me more of when you were talking about being in the audience. So the
Mm.
other one feels like a mirror or a window to me, and this feels more like it's not anything like this, but I'm feeling like a puppet show, like contained, like you would like you would a puppet, even though the most extraordinary puppet show I've ever seen in my life. But or a diorama or something. It brings me very much in. So I'm
Mm.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Therese. Go ahead.
No, that's really cool. I've never, it's great to look at it from other people's perspectives and their thoughts on it. This was a commission piece that I did, and I was so intimidated by this because it's actually 2 feet by 3 feet in real life. And it took me, I don't know, it took me months and months and months to do this one. And I call it like the daily bread icon because working on this icon taught me so much of what the process actually is, which is literally daily bread, like a little bit every day, over and over and over again. And like sometimes tears, sometimes like no emotion, sometimes exuberance that, wow, like this is clicking, things are going well. And so I thought it was an important icon to show because this taught me so much about that, like that part of the process of just, yeah, daily stuff, you know?
I'm going to try and keep talking, even though I can't stop staring at this piece. This is so beautiful. And what I really love about this, can you talk about, first of all, can you talk about who is in this for those of us who don't have a connection to saints
Sure.
or
Sure. I mean, well, there's Christ first and foremost at the very top. And then this was commissioned for a deacon and his wife. And so there's some personal people in the icon that represent them and their family. And then in the center, I think that is like their priest, but I think I based his image off of Saint Ignatius. And then there is a prophet, I believe. At the very, if I'm looking at it head on, he is on the right. And I believe his icon is based off of St. James, or I kind of use St. James's icon to make that man. And then, there's a lot of imagery in here that even I don't really understand. I mean, I see in a lot of iconography at the very top, like it looks like the wind and maybe the sun, and but they're personified. I see that in iconography all the time, and I love it. I love this this really neat idea that all creation is alive, and like yeah, okay. I don't even know what else to say about that, but I love it. And then that mountain to the right hand side is Mount Athos, which is a very important place for Orthodox Christians. There's a lot of monasteries there. It's sort of like, for me as a Roman Catholic, Rome is a big deal. Like everybody wants to go to Rome and see the Vatican, see the Pope. That's kind of like their Rome is Mount Athos in Greece. And I believe, yeah, so the gentleman who commissioned this piece had been to Mount Athos and wanted that in the icon. So yeah, it's a very personal icon to him. But what's so great about iconography, I guess, is that there is this universal element, so that like even though you didn't commission this icon, it's speaking to you in a way, it seems, or you're in some sort of relationship with it just by looking at it, if that makes sense.
You really are. And how do you structure out the relationship between the different I'm going to say characters in the,
Mhm.
like, how do you, this is just, I guess because I don't have, so I could be, I'm very ignorant in when it comes to the Bible or spiritual texts. It's not something that I'm very familiar with. I mean, I was when I was young, but I don't really connect with that as it's not part of my family structure. So maybe when somebody from that background is looking at this, it's obvious to them why people are facing the directions that they are, who's
Mhm.
up, who's down. Obviously, I understand why Christ would be up at the top, but can you talk a little bit about like the upwards down structure of this?
Well, I would say I did base this icon on when this gentleman went to Mount Athos, he found an icon that was laid out very similar to this, in terms of where people were standing in relationship with each other. And so I guess I just sort of grounded it in that tradition that was already made, but they do sort of make a triangle, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, see, even I can be surprised at little hidden elements that I didn't really appreciate when I was painting it.
This is just beautiful. I don't want to move on to the next slide, but I'm going
Yeah,
to. I can always go back.
yeah, that's right.
This is the piece that I have.
Yeah,
So
thank.
I definitely want to hear about this piece.
Yep. I painted this because I wanted to do something completely in egg tempera. Like I learned on acrylic and a little bit of egg tempera. And so acrylic is just it's paint with pigment and then like sort of I think it's like a plastic base mixed together, and that's very great and wonderful to use. And I feel like so egg tempera is made with like a dry powdery pigment, and then you take egg yolk, vinegar, and water, and you mix that all together. And it's a very old way of painting. And I think a lot of the original icons were painted in this way. So sometimes iconographers like to have that connection. I like it because the colors melt so well together, and you can really play with that softness. I also really love it because when I'm washing off my palette, like I have to scrape acrylic off really hard, but egg tempera just melts right off, and it's very,
Let's
oh, it's really
get
nice.
down to the practicalities of it.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right.
Can you
Um,
tell me a
yeah.
little bit about this story and how you create? I'm going to call it a cell because I'm just thinking in terms of a movie. How you decide what you're going? Do you start with the actual story itself? where do you start and how do you get to this point?
Mhm. Okay, well, I remember starting this sketch or this concept because the bear was coming up for me in dreams, and I wanted to. I just instinctively wanted to paint an icon of Saint Dymphna and a bear, and so I drew a couple of sketches of that. And the sketches I drew tried to follow her life. So I sketched one of her as a child with a bear. I sketched one of her. I think this is it, like the next one, and then I can't remember what the third one would have been, what point in her life that would have been. But this one just worked. Yeah, like it really worked. I loved the ferocity of the bear, and yet he's a little bit held back, and he is the vessel, like he is the boat of moving forward, of moving, away from this tyranny of the dark masculine that wants to consume her. And then the water is very important for me, and I wanted to make that wild, but also like Celtic because she is a Celtic saint. I wanted to show her spiritual father because he's often, I feel like in all the images I've seen of Saint Dymphna, he's absent, but he is like that good masculine figure. You're like maybe even on an inner level, that I think everybody needs to just sort of like move, you know. And then the sun and the moon characterized, I just love that. So I wanted to include that in this icon. And then I really played with the background a lot of this icon. Again, trying to just like show my love of how egg tempera works together with the different colors that you can do. And so that's what I can say to that. What do you have any more thoughts on that?
No, I love that this came from, that the spark was created by a dream of a bear. Bear dreams are so powerful, and there's so much symbolism there that we can't get into right now. But I really love the fact that, the bear is a boat,
Mm-hmm.
and that that the bear is literally going through the darkest waters of the unconscious. And for me, part of what I loved about this piece, I mean, I love everything about it, but for me, the background feels like somebody escaping like fire or a bit, it feels very much like, are they going to make it out or aren't they? There's a definite journey that's happening here. And but the constant of the sun and the moon just feels like, okay, I don't know, I just love it so much, and I love the colors that you used. And can you talk about how do you actually select the colors? Is it just out of tradition, or is it out of a deeper or a different kind of emotional meaning for you?
Yes, I think it depends on the icon. I think with this one, green, I did want her spiritual father to wear green because in iconography, especially in the West, I guess I shouldn't say that this is necessarily Eastern iconography, but in the West, green is a color of newness, of new life. And she is a martyr, so she is going to be wearing red. I guess I did follow the tradition on that as well, but it also just looks pretty. I feel like
Yeah.
it is a darker red. Like I wanted to show her royalty. She was an Irish princess. And then the bear, I think like I can't remember if I just really love Venetian red pigment. It is probably more of that. Like I love that color red. But I think as I look at it now, it's like, yes, the redness of the bear symbolizing how important our passions are, our emotions are, to move us, you know.
Right. It's like the libido of the whole
Yeah.
thing. It's just carrying you through. That is so beautiful. I just love this piece so much. Okay, I'm going to move forward onto the slide. Okay, so this is the pieces, these are the pieces of your process that you sent me. And maybe you can go through these. I'm particularly interested in, I don't know if that's wood or stone, but I did read something about stones and iconography. So I'm excited to hear about this map.
Okay, well, I wanted it to be a whole bunch of different things just to show that this word really is like it's a wild sort of thing that happens outside of me sitting down to paint an icon. Like, so I have Baba Yaga, who is like just such a great iconic figure in a lot of fairy tales, and Russian fairy tales. I get so much inspiration from Russian iconography. So having this like connection with her, and I decided to paint her for a Halloween exhibition. That was so much fun. And but it's like that feeds my iconography too. Like you can't just, or at least for me, I cannot just paint icons, and I think other iconographers speak to this too, that because iconography ideally is an organic thing, that you're not just being rigid and narrow about it. And so I guess like, I'm showing my hand with a little face on it. I'm just playing with my kid, and that's just another piece of it. Like I'm a mom. I do dishes. I do laundry. I change diapers, and that goes into this work too. That affects it too. Some of my favorite Russian iconographers, they post on Instagram little videos of their kids playing. Like, of course, this is part of it, And so yeah, I guess that's an important piece of it, that I'm quite human. Then there's just different swatches from an egg tempera class that I was taking. There's an icon I painted on rocks up north at my cabin. There's a sketch. There's candles, beeswax candles, again, just showing that I have other interests and hobbies that feed this. There's the parish I attend, the church. There's a picture of a merry-go-round at a park. That's my foot. I don't know if that's the one you're referring to, but that's actually a merry-go-round. But I took a picture of it because I loved the colors so much. And it's like, yes, like those little inspirations from your day to day, they might show up in an icon. And then if I'm going like way, way to the right, if I'm looking at the screen, that's me at a gallery. Part of, for me, being an iconographer has been getting the icons out of my house and into the public, or just out in galleries, getting people to interact with them, look at them. That has been so rewarding for me, and important to do. Um, and then the top one is from the book of Kells, which I recently took a seminar on from a Jungian analyst in Toronto, or from Toronto, I want to say. And that was so fascinating for me to learn everything that went into the artistic structure of the book of Kells. And we felt like this page in particular from the book of Kells was reflecting on an old world merging with a new world. And what can that merging together of culture, of worlds, of times mean? What fruit can come of that? What does it look like? Like, it looks a bit chaotic, but it's also like this beautiful chaos. And then, this page creates the initials of Christ. And so that idea is really now sort of trying to fuel my work even more as an iconographer. And that has just been a huge source of inspiration for me, to look at that.
How are you starting to? I think this is the last page before I'm going to share your information. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment.
Sure.
But how are you starting to experiment with bridging the old and the new? What does
Hmm.
that look like in your process? Because again, it goes back to that reverence thing. When we're going to something that looks like these icons look, it's sort of like for me, the most difficult part of creativity is, when do I stop? And I know that we spoke a little bit about that, when something surprises you, but when you're merging to, you sort of serve as this threshold in a way.
Yeah.
So have you ever tried to do, I don't know if you've ever seen the Taschen book on tarot cards, but
Mm-mm.
it's kind of incredible because they do like the classic, I can't remember what it's called right now, but the classic, and then you'll go through all these different artists who are doing renditions of that classic card. And some of them are just mind blowing to see because you can sort of see the connection to the original card, but they're completely different. So, have you ever experimented with doing something completely modern looking?
Mm. I would say not yet. I mean, I would say that I just so I just sketched an icon of Saint Thomas Aquinas that looks very different from what I've done. Um, and I love it. And how do I say this? It's sort of like I was sort of trying to do exactly what you're talking about. Um, and I'm so curious how how that's going to turn out when it's finally painted, and B, how people are going to respond to it. I mean, I guess I've tried to copy modern Russian iconographers, and that's in Christ and the Unconscious. That's very much based on a contemporary Russian icon that doesn't look super traditional. So I guess I do sort of look at what are iconographers who are doing this. What are they doing? Like, how are they bridging that gap of like what is happening here now with the traditional language of iconography? And I'm really inspired by one Russian iconographer named Andrei Bodko. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But he bases a lot of his iconography on Lubak, which is like a cartoon sort of like Russian thing. And I absolutely love that, and I think like he has found a way to do what you were describing in a way that's consistent. I feel like I'm very much experimental still. Like, I feel like this icon of Christ in the Unconscious that I did is going to look very different from the icon I sketched of St. Thomas Aquinas. So I don't know, does that answer your question
It
much?
does.
Yeah.
I love how things live. And I'm going to be kind of moving backwards right now, just thinking in terms of like, first of all, I'd like you to speak a little bit about your grandmother's house and how
Mhm.
you first started working with icons to connect with her. And then I'd like you to speak about your relationship to icons in your own home and how you engage on a daily basis with the icons that you create, and also what you see, if anything, because your kids are young. How do these icons live in your kids' lives, and do they actually try to create their own?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, my nanny's house. Okay, so my grandmother, I call her Nani. She was for me like who I always wanted to be as a woman. I mean, she was so fiery and passionate and approachable. And her house for me just held this magic to it. Like I could be so free in that house, so myself always. It was like this switch went on when I walked into that house. And I remember, and I still don't know why she had icons, but she did. And I just remember as a child looking at them. And oh, I'm so glad you asked this though, because sometimes icons can be scary. Like they can be disturbing. And that sort of like, this wasn't like fluffy art, or this wasn't like Jesus is soft and smooth, and he was sharp, he was very like otherly. And that is so important, I think, in iconography, that it does make you stop a little bit because it's a little disturbing, or it's not, I don't know, it doesn't comfort you maybe necessarily immediately. At least some icons don't. And so I think just the fact that that depiction of Christ was included in Nani's house, you know, I think that really affected me. And I bought my first icon in college when I went to St. George's Orthodox Festival in St. Paul, Minnesota. And that icon has been with me through everything since. And when I became a mother, it was really difficult being a young mom, feeling isolated, feeling just confused why I didn't love this, this new motherhood. And the icon I bought was of Mary, of the Theotokos and Christ. And we talk about the maternal gaze. And for me, that icon was a maternal gaze. She was present. I wasn't totally alone because I was under the gaze of the Theotokos in this icon. And through seeing a therapist and just getting plugged into Antiochian House of Studies, that's where I began to study iconography. And I just signed up because I thought it looked cool. And I had that experience with them. I had that experience with my grandmother's icons. And as soon as I started trying to draw that egg over and over and over again, it was like I just had never felt so relaxed in my body. And I couldn't remember how long, just that drawing the simple egg, and it hasn't been super relaxing all the time by any means. Nevertheless, I feel rejuvenated if I've been working on an icon, but also the fact that people have responded to my iconography is just says something to me about what I'm doing, that it is something that is worthwhile. And yeah, even if no one saw it, it would still be worthwhile. But I guess that was just more confirmation for me that this is something, you know? And then I remember you asked me about my children. I would say sometimes I would put them, if they were laying down as babies, I would put that icon that I referenced of the Theotokos by them, and they would look at it. They would stop and just look at it for a while. I think just them being sort of living their lives under the presence of the icons is something. I think that is enough. And whatever happens as they get older, but they're there. Oh, and yes. So in terms of my own personal relationship with them, I mean, I talked about the Theotokos, but this is one I painted quite a while ago, and it didn't really get much of a response. I had it as a postcard on Etsy for a while, but I look at this icon in my room all the time. It is Saint Catherine of Alexandria, and I call it Saint Catherine's inner work, because she was this very smart, intelligent woman who owned the royal court philosophers. I mean, she could beat anybody in an argument, and yet she had this inner work to do, and this is so me, because I can be very I get really excited about learning, about studying, about knowing my stuff. I get so excited and into that I can get sort of pulled up in the clouds and out of my body very easily.
Yeah.
It happens like that. And what's going on in here, it's actually a different icon I painted, but it's the Theotokos pulling down her soul essentially from the demons who want to pull her up and out of her life, out of her body. And she has her head bowed. And when I'm experiencing this, which is a lot, this icon is there, and it connects me with this incredible, incredible saint. So yeah, I would say it's an example of my relationship. And this one's special to me too, because it is one that I painted, and so, yeah.
So I'm wondering about when you were just speaking, I'm wondering, do you struggle with bringing the intuitive into your process? So obviously you're intuitive, but when we do get caught up in the how do we, what was it, who, we kind of close the space between trusting that it's going to come through anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Just like your bear.
Mhm.
Like the bear came through from a totally different space. So, how do you make sure that you're not creating from your head? Or I don't want to, I know, I'm not quite sure if that, but do you understand what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Getting too in the brain.
I think it's because I'm doing art, because I tell you what, I tell this to people all the time. I didn't really do art prior to iconography. I mean, yeah, I painted as a kid. And then I became so scholastic. Like I loved writing papers. I mean, oh man, I love reading and studying, and I love showing a professor what I know. And I think like the fact that I am not writing in a logical way, I'm writing, but I'm writing with symbolism, I think is really turns that on its head in and of itself. I think I'm still tempted to do it though. I'm still tempted to control the process too much. And when I was working on an icon of Saint Nicholas and I was creating Krampus, like the creature, in sort of
Yeah.
Austrian tradition that accompanies Saint Nicholas. And it really struck me like when painting that creature, that feeling of letting go and then like, oh, like this thing is like has its own life, and so sometimes it's really apparent to me and sometimes it's not, but I think it's less of a temptation because I am working with images and not writing a paper per se. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a life, like it'll be a lifelong thing for me to let that go for sure. Yeah.
So, for people who want to dive into this, I mean, you just kind of started because of the connection to your grandmother. I feel I don't think this is a kind of work that I would do because it feels intimidating to me. Who knows? Maybe I would. But I also feel, and I think we all have this connection to source, whether we know it or not. And that includes the collective unconscious. But if people were going to start experimenting with or dip their toe into learning about iconography, where would you recommend that they start?
That's a great question. I mean, if you want, I would say this. Like, I think it would be important to look at the breadth of iconography. So Pinterest, like you might want to start on Pinterest or social media and just like type in iconography, see what happens, see what different things pop up on your algorithm. There's a really good contemporary iconographer, Andrei Bodko. He's in Russia. Then there's like Alypius Loft. He's also a really good contemporary iconographer. And I feel like they're willing to engage and talk. I think oh man, here's a good one. Go to an Orthodox church just to visit, and you will find incredible icons. I think just like finding ways to look at them is a really great starting point because they themselves are the lesson, maybe, or like they themselves are enough. And if you're interested in painting iconography, I would say yes, look at a lot of different icons. Start there, and and things will follow. There are classes out there. Sometimes if you type in iconography class, it might pop up on Google in your area, or there's a lot of like teachers in Russia or Greece that speak English and offer classes online too, I would say. But I think like you're gonna want to learn like I and I'll say this too, like even though I've been doing this a few years, I just started taking some beginner courses because there's things that I miss, in my foundation. And anyway, I don't know, it's a hard question to answer maybe, but yeah, I would start by looking at icons more. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to be putting your social information and all of that at the end of this video, but just really quickly, is there anything that you want people to know about what's coming up next for you or what you're exploring?
Yeah, well, I'm taking a drawing class, so it's going to be a lot of homework for drawing and posting my homework on social media. I really hope to get this icon of St. Thomas Aquinas painted. And that's sort of where I'm at right now. I think it's going to be, I'm in a growth period for sure, a practicing and growing period. But please do follow me. I really appreciate that. And I also just want to say, Stacy, thank you so much. Like I consider myself an emerging artist, and so just to be able to have you as an artist like converse with me, and I do look at you as a mentor in many ways, so like just thank you. That means a lot to me to
Oh, thank you so
spend this
much.
time. Yeah.
I love that we're in this community of artists that are uplifting one another. And I feel like right now we need that so much more than anything else, to be creating and to be in community, supporting one another. So I really appreciate you being here. And it's so cool to be the first episode. And I think
Yeah.
we did a